Welcome to the Aerospace Advantage podcast, brought to you by PenFed. I'm your host, Heather Lucky Penney. Here on the Aerospace Advantage, we speak with leaders in the DoD, industry, and other subject matter experts to explore the intersection of strategy, operational concepts, technology, and policy when it comes to air and space power. So where did the time go? 2024 is almost over. And keeping with tradition, we're wrapping up the year with members of our team swapping flying stories and other operational tales. You know, you hear us discussing the future of air and space power most of the time, but the reality is that the members of our team began their careers as operators in the Air Force, and even one served in the Navy. So this week, we're going to share some fun stories with you. Sit back, relax, and have some fun as we think about our time back in uniform, the good old days. Trust me, when we were all better, smarter, leaner, meaner, faster, all that good stuff. And I'll tell you, the longer it's been, the better I was. And so with that, we've got our very own Dahm, JV Venable, Sledge Harbor, Houston Slider Cantwell, and last but not least, Boots Reeves. Everyone, thanks so much for being here.
Glad to be here, Heather.
Wonderful to be with you, Lucky, and really looking forward to the conversation.
Thanks for having me. Good to be here, and happy holidays, everyone.
Lucky, great to be part of the team. Thanks so much.
Hi, everyone. Glad to be here.
So, Dahm, you are a diversity hire. The Navy. It was a dark and stormy night at sea. Go.
Indeed. All right. So I know I talk about China a lot on our podcast, and I was asked, we'll come up with a fun story about China. I got to tell you, I spent 3 years in China. There were not a whole lot of fun stories coming out of China, and the ones that I could tell you about that are interesting would probably get me in trouble with the Defense Intelligence Agency General Counsel. So we will set all of that aside. We're going to go in the way, way back machine to when I first started as an intelligence officer, summer of 1994. So this is like 30 years ago, right?
You're a baby back then.
Now, you talk about diversity, right? I was a Navy officer with a Marine Corps squadron at Aviano Air Base, Italy, working with the 31st Fighter Wing.
That's a lot of cats and dogs.
I know. So we're there in 1994. This is the days of operations over Bosnia, Provide Promise and Deny Flight. Provide Promise was this humanitarian airlift relief operation. Deny Flight was the NATO operation to enforce the no-fly zone over Bosnia and Herzegovina after the collapse of the former Yugoslav Republic. So anyway, it's early days. The Triple Nickel and the Five and Dime, the 555th and the 510th Fighter Squadron have just moved down from Germany to Italy. And I'm there with Marine Fighter Attack Squadron All-Weather 224, VMFA AW 224. It's an F-18D squadron, one of those two-seat squadrons that's deployed out there from South Carolina. So anyway, one day we had two F-18s on the tanker, and they get this call from Magic, that's the NATO AWACS aircraft, and there are three unidentified fighters flying up the Croatian coast. So this is the most exciting thing that has happened in the enforcement of the no-fly zone to date. Mostly they're just drilling circles in the sky, not a whole lot of activity. So these guys are hot to trot, right? They're ready to go. They drop off the tanker, they're vectored to intercept, and they come across these three Croatian aircraft MiG-21s. Now they're not violating the no-fly zone. They're not over Bosnia. They're just flying up the coast. But there are three of them, and that's kind of weird. So my guys might have locked them up with their fire control radar.
For funds.
Might have happened.
Funsies.
For funsies. But, the report, they came back, they debriefed with me, we put it into the system, and the tactics guys are getting involved, and they're like, what is this? Like, maybe it's some kind of ringer tactic, right? Like the two ship allows themselves to be intercepted, and then this third guy will, come out of nowhere, right? So there's all this analysis about this and questions about what they were doing. So fast forward a month or two, and I've got this buddy, Big Bird, that's his call sign. He drew the short straw on our day off, and he had to stick around to man this static display for an international press day. And he meets this Croatian newspaper reporter. And this guy invites him, like, hey, you should come to Zagreb. I've got people that I know in the Air Force, in the Croatian Air Force, that I would like you to meet. Well, Big Bird thinks this is a fantastic idea, right? And he comes to me and he's like, "Hey, Mike, you're the squadron spy. Like, how can we get into Zagreb?" And I'm like, "Well, we'll need to get permission." So we went to our squadron chain of command, and they're like, "Yeah, sure. What's the harm, right?" We get a rental car. Now, pretty sure that we weren't supposed to take the rental car out of Italy, but after 30 years, I think the statute of limitations for
You can fess up to that at least.
Hertz and Avis have gone away now. So we sell this as a liaison visit with the United Nations Forward Air Controllers. So we had they're actually Dutch forward air controllers that were in country, and they would come out and work with us at the range to do practice for close air support. So these guys are visiting, and we're like, hey, we're going to follow you back into Croatia to go to Zagreb. So we load up the rental car and we head out and we follow these guys. And I don't know what was going on at the border, but they were just like, oh, well, you're with the UN guys, right? So they just wave us through and we get all the way to Zagreb. So we meet with this newspaper reporter, and he brings along a friend. And this friend looks a little shady. We found this out later. He was a Croatian counterintelligence officer. And he announces that he is very happy to meet us, and he has arranged not just for a meeting with some guys from the Croatian Air Force, but he has arranged for a meeting with the Croatian Air Force Chief of Staff. So it immediately occurs to me, even though I am at this point, I guess I should have said this up front, I am an ensign, right? I am an O1. So, no real experience whatsoever in the world. But even I, at the tender, at the tender age of 20-something as an O1, realized we were in a lot of trouble. Because this captain and I are
alone and unafraid.
In a foreign country, without permission from anybody but our squadron chain of command. No one really knows we're there. But I had the presence of mind to bring the number to the embassy switchboard. So I call up and I say, hey, I need the defense attaché to call me at this hotel right away. And Army Colonel, he was furious. I mean, he was like, what are you doing in my country? Who told you could come here? Why are you talking to the Croatians? Like, this is a disaster. But he had been trying to get a meeting with the Air Force Chief of Staff for a while. So it worked. Instead of kicking us out of country, he allowed us to have the meeting.
And did he tag along?
Oh, no, yeah. That was the whole deal, right? That was to get him in the room with the Croatian Chief of Staff. So now we were just a vehicle for making that happen.
You're heroes, suddenly.
Suddenly we're heroes. So we get into this meeting. It's very cordial. They're very friendly. There's great food. There's lots of good discussion. And at one point, the Croatian Chief of Staff says, I have arranged for you to take a flight in a MiG-21. We have 2-seat MiG-21s, and we can take you on a flight. Awesome. So Big Bird is like thinking, like, this is fantastic. Like, I'm going to get to fly in a MiG-21, a Croatian MiG-21. And of course, the defense attaché is like, he's just seeing the headlines, like NATO pilots fly Croatian MiG-21s. Like, this has got disaster written all over it. So that is never going to happen. But we do go out to the airfield, and I've got a nice picture in my office. Maybe we can put it in with the show notes that shows me and Big Bird and the defense attaché with what at the time was the entire Croatian Air Force, which is like, 10 guys in flight suits and tennis shoes. And while we're out there looking at this MiG-21 and getting pictures sitting in the cockpit and stuff like that, we're like, I went up to one of the pilots and I'm like, hey, so about this 3-ship formation, like what's up with that? And he's like, yes, why do you lock us up? Like, that is not very polite. You lock us up. We were not violating no-fly zone, just flying up the coast. And I said, well, we were really wondering why you had three aircraft flying like that. And he's like, oh, I am photographer. I was taking pictures for our calendar.
Of course.
And that's the story. It was just it's kind of a fun story. We made it back without incidents.
Did you get a calendar?
I did, in fact. I have it.
The calendar?
I have it at home.
But no flight?
No flight in the MiG-21. But I understand Lucky has flown a MiG-21.
I have flown a MiG-21. It was after my first daughter was born, and I hadn't gone yet back to the TX course, right? So I'm flying a MiG-21. I'm in the backseat. By the way, they've got this little deal where they've got a periscope for the backseater because you're sitting down so low, and it's such a streamlined cockpit, you literally have no forward visibility. And the IP sits in the back seat, and that's where I'm riding, right? Because, I don't have a type rating. I'm just going for a ride and get a little bit of stick time. But that periscope, it all mirrors, it's all mechanical. There's nothing digital. It is old-fashioned. works like a champ. I mean, like you can, once you get used to it, it's seamless. You really feel like you've got total visibility out of the front of the cockpit. But like I said, I'm like just a couple weeks postpartum. I mean, I'm just going to say my abs were not in the best shape. I was not in 9G shape, right? It was,
you know what that's like, Slatter.
it was really tough. But I will say this also, pulling G's stimulates lactation. So it was kind of a hot mess once we got out of the seat. But
TMI.
it's true. It's 100% true.
Oh,
it's like
my
I far exceeded
What
my
a
10%.
vivid picture, right? A vivid picture.
Yeah, we'll include the picture of Dahm in front of his MiG-21 back when he was leaner, meaner, better looking. All this
Instead of the picture of all of the men in the room blushing right now.
It's just warm in here. Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. So JV, over to you with I'm sure you've got a much better story than I did. But so you've got time in the OB-10, which by the way, for me is totally a bucket seat airplane. That would be such a fun aircraft to fly. But you've also got time in the Viper. You were a Thunderbird lead. So the list is long. And I'm sure we could finish an entire case of beer and more and only hear a tiny number of your stories. So what do you have for us today?
Wow. Well, Heather, I'm going to disappoint everyone because my story doesn't have lactation or MiG-21s in it. It's more of a boring, mundane Christmas Day 2004. I was bragged to go up into Iraq to be the only two ship over the country at the time. And you back this up the night prior. A bunch of us go downtown and we find the only Starbucks in Doha. And you know how in the United States we're all afraid that we're going to offend someone with music or anything. But this Starbucks is filled with guitaris of all walks of life, people that are dressed in absolute native garb there. And then around the whole venue of this Starbucks, which is exterior mostly, are Christ is Born and the most devout Christian music. We have a great night, and we're all sitting there going, "This is so surreal."
Yeah.
It's the evening prior to Christmas, and so me and my wingman, we launch out of Al Udeid, and we take off on a radar trail departure. Weather's going to be bad uprange. We knew that. We get in country, we hit our first tanker for the refueling, and it was really funny when I pulled up on the boom because the visibility was bad, and and when I snuggled up and made contact, I looked up and there was the boomer, and he had this massive Santa hat on, and I just chuckled, and I thought that was kind of cool. I pulled up on the wing, my wingman got some gas, and I looked up in the cockpit, and both the left and right seaters were looking over at me, and they both had Santa hats on. I thought that was kind of cool. We go up, and we're basically orbiting over the top of Baghdad, and we're there for about an hour, go hit another tanker, different tanker. Everybody's dressed in the same garb, got the big Santa hats on. Everybody's just jolly. But the weather goes from surface up to 23,000 feet. And we get to the end of what our frag time was, and we find out that the guys who were supposed to relieve us out of Balad can't launch because of the weather. So we end up staying up there for another 2 hours when we get a call that there's a troops in contact in Mosul. And the weather's supposed to be bad up there. We top off with the tanker and we go. I put my wingman in trail, and there's no radar letdown. There's no GCI. There's no actual radar coverage of the country at the time. And I get my wingman in trail and I go, "Hey, I'm going to take us down to around 2,200 feet MSL over the top of this area. And if we don't break out, then we're going to climb back up. But just stay with me. I'll continue whistling. We'll see if we break out." So we broke out about 1,000 feet AGL over Mosul. And we find this platoon, 3 Stryker vehicles. One of them had hit an IED, and the other 2 were towing it and basically running guard. And so we basically started in orbit, and we did what was kind of normal procedure for us then. We called it yo-yo. It's you're on your own. Mm-hmm. And so when we get to about 45 minutes prior to needing gas, you launch your wingman up, and he goes and hits the tanker. And then when he comes back down, he relieves you, and we basically keep an orbit over these guys with our targeting pods. And we're basically at 1,000 feet flying pretty doggone fast. to stay out of harm's way. And we escort these guys until they get into their concern, a little outpost out there. And once they get inside the base, we climb up and we get back up and hit the tanker. And the sortie at that point was about 8.5 hours when they finally got in. We hit our last tanker, the last of 10 tankers that day, and the guys are dressed the same way, and we just start cruising down towards Al Udeid, and it was funny. I kind of noticed it on the way up into Iraq, but on the way back, it was about dusk. And every controller, be they expat Australian or Saudi controller or Kuwaiti controller, every one of those guys, as we're heading south, wished us a Merry Christmas. And I just kind of chuckled at that for a while. And then I thought it was so very strange how sensitive we are in the States to that same idea that other people are going to be offended by our beliefs or about the time in our lives of this day in Christianity. When we touched down that night, it was after dark. The sortie was 11.5 hours, and we're taxiing back. And I just started thinking about the day. And we didn't drop a bomb, we didn't shoot a round of ammunition, but knowing those guys got back into that concern was pretty special. And knowing they had the chance to go back and celebrate another Christmas in the years beyond, at least that night, they were going to be okay. It was a special evening, and it made being over there feel like it was the right thing for us to do. So great moment and a great memory.
That's a really poignant story. Thank you for sharing that with us.
I think
Hey,
after
Shane, can you splice in Silent Night after this, and we'll just kind of go into the.
Yeah, that'd be totally
Hey,
appropriate.
JV at Sledge, my personal best is a 12.0, and they almost had to winch me out of the cockpit. I'm sure it must have it must have taken a while to get out.
Oh, geez. Sorties that long. I've only done a
Sledge,
12.5. It was awful.
Sledge, as you know, the seat is wicked comfortable. So the whole time you're flying, you don't even think about it. But not until you try to get out of the jet do you realize how long you've been sitting there.
At least you guys have piddle packs. That's all I'm saying.
Yeah.
So, Sledge, over to you. What's your story?
Yeah, I don't have a cool story like that, but I am going to do a little bit of a flashback to December of 1997. I was a flight commander in the Fiends, harumph for all you Fiends out there.
Harumph.
And there was a Lieutenant Pumbaa Cantwell in the squadron. And at that point, I think he still had a plastic reindeer duct taped to the roof of his Yugo.
What the?
My kids are still emotionally scarred from seeing that reindeer under Yugo. I mean, to this day, they talk.
I'm sorry. Pumbaa Cantwell?
Pumbaa, yeah.
Holy cow! There's a
What
renaming
That's,
episode somewhere, man.
That's a story for another podcast. But,
Let's see. Slider.
Oh my.
Pumbaa. Slider. Pumbaa.
Sledge.
Happy holidays.
You went there.
And so at that point, I'm a senior captain. I'm a flight commander. I think I had about 2,200 hours in the F-16, and Baba Rand was our squadron commander. Rev Jones was the OPSO, and we were having a pilot meeting. And I got up and I was stomping up and down saying, I don't know why we do overhead SFOs in the F-16, because you're never going to lose your engine at 8,000 feet over an airfield. Nobody thought anything of it. About 2 months later, it's January of 97. And there's a PACAF IG visit. We're having some type of a higher headquarters inspection. And I'm supposed to be number 3 of a 4-ship. It's a TAC check for number 1. The winds over the water go out of limit, so they cancel everything. The IG looks at me and goes, "You're due for a TAC check. Here's a no-notice TAC check." So we go back to the mission planning room. We do a quick, okay, we're going to go to Pilsung, stay over land, IP target. Here's a low-level route. We'll circle a couple of divert fields on the map, and off we'll go. Everything was uneventful up to the IP. Push the throttle up, check right, start the pop, get an auto transfer to sec on the engine. And for those of you that have flown the F-16, it happens, but it's really something that gets your attention. Pushed off the master caution, looked down at the RPM, and it was a little bit lower than it probably should have been. So I called to knock it off. told the flight examiner we were headed toward the nearest to Wanju, the nearest airfield. And he said, hey, he goes, one, you're leaking fuel. And I'm like, okay, that doesn't seem like it's a good thing. And I wasn't sure if we could make it back to Osan. We're about 70 miles away. The nearest field, Wanju, a Korean field, is about 30 miles. Start doing a climb, get a 1-to-1 to the airfield. There's and I don't know, probably 18,000 feet or so. Talking to Airedale on the way out, tell them we've got an emergency. We're going to go to divert to the Korean field, get them all set to receive us. There's an undercast at a very thin undercast at about 12,000. So I set the runway heading on the HSI. Once I get that 1-to-1, I start arcing the field until I'm lined up with the runway. And I start down on my 1-to-1 from about 12 miles out, finally get pushed over to Wanju Tower, and a little bit of a language barrier problem there. As I tell them I'm coming in for a straight in full stop, and about every minute during flight, I'm losing 1% of my RPM. So I'm thinking, this is not going to be a good thing here. And when I hit 5 miles, the tower clears 2 F5s to take off. So I'm like, okay, this isn't going to go well. Yeah. So I put the throttle back up to mill. I climb back up. I get over the airfield at 8,000 feet AGL, and the motor quits completely. And the first thing I'm thinking is, that was pretty stupid. So I still had fuel in the external tanks. I jettisoned those off somewhere into the forest. And do a flawless flame out approach, 360 land. I did not need to engage the cable, but I was a little bit nervous because no one's been to Wanju, but about 500 feet past the departure end, there's a river that runs through, and it's January in Korea. It can be a little bit cold, so it was not looking good. And so the PACAF IG goes up. He does an orbit. He's relaying back to Osan what happens. And I'm maybe on the runway 15 minutes. I've got all sorts of people. The Koreans are out there looking, most of them downwind from the emergency power unit, which was a special event. And I finally, as my radio was starting to crackle because my battery's dying, I asked the tower if they're going to come tow me off. And they say in their best broken English, Roger, taxi clear. It was at that point I realized what had just transpired was different in my cockpit than what was going on with the Koreans. But anyway, it ended up working out well. I stayed with the jet until they sent an Army squad over from Camp Eagle, which was not far away. They sent a team up with a new engine the next day, swapped it out. I was the only functional check flight pilot qualified in the wing. So Friday, 3 days later, I get to go back and fly the airplane back out of there. The nice thing was they didn't have to add gas because full internal tanks. And then we go back, business as usual there at Osan. And I think probably the thing that I remember the most about that, other than it was a good experience. Robin Rand, the first pilot meeting we had after that, made me get up, and it was like it was like doing a nuke cert. Everybody was hitting me up on, hey, why'd you do this? What worked, what didn't work, what were your lessons learned? It was a really good learning experience, not just for me, but I think for everybody else in the squadron there. And that one event has really led to a lot of the things in my career that I've kind of I've taken to heart. One of those is never say never, because you never know what's going to happen. You need to be prepared. You need to be prepared. And if you're in a single seat, single engine fighter, the best way to be prepared is know your airplane. And then learn from the mistakes of others, because hopefully there's some people out there that learn something from my stupidity.
And don't tempt fate.
True.
Don't tempt fate.
Yeah.
And maybe have a Korean phrase book handy.
What caused
Sledge,
it?
did you pass the check ride?
So actually, I got an EQ incomplete on the check ride because I never got to employ ordnance. So I had to go back a couple weeks later and finish up the check ride. But yeah. Actually, the problem with the jet, the engine in the airplane was 9 hours at a depot level maintenance. And there's a fuel oil heat exchanger that they basically run fuel through it to preheat the fuel before it goes into the combustion chamber, but also to cool the engine oil. And when it was reassembled during depot, it was reassembled incorrectly. So the bolts were not properly wired. It wasn't torqued down right. And it's about the size of a cigar box. And as the vibrations of the engine were working it loose, it started losing fuel. And that's what the IP saw coming out the back. And then when it got to the point where it could no longer hold the gasket in place, the engine flamed out. So,
Wow.
Wow. So Pumbaa, over to you.
I don't know who you're talking to. But Sledge, revenge is a dish best served cold. I'll leave it at that.
Manage your money on your time with 24/7 digital banking on the PenFed mobile app. Easily make payments, transfer funds, and deposit checks through mobile deposit.
That's music to my ears.
Learn more at penfed.org. Federally insured by NCUA.
You know, it's funny because when you first showed up here at Mitchell, I was like, Houston? Slider. Who's a Slider guy? Houston. I mean, your actual name is so awesome. Like, you don't really need a call sign.
My parents gave me a solid on that one.
Yeah, they totally
agree.
did. They totally did. All right.
hey, before you start, though, I do know the story of it. I was there when you got named, so be careful what you say.
This is...
Which call sign? Both.
Pumbaa.
Does Sledge have to come back again? I mean, what the? It's great to be amongst who I thought were friends. But
Hey, my mother used to say they only pick on you because they like you.
They
funny.
lied.
said that,
I
but
know.
wasn't true. No, I'd love to share some stories of our time back in the Fiends there, Sledge. I've got lots of gun footage of BFM, me taking down Sledge, but I'd be lying. So
Hey, man, don't admit that. It just has to be 10% true. Do you have gun footage?
I do.
Of
I do.
anything.
And that's Sledge right there. I'm gunning his brains out.
Yeah.
You're supposed to be strafing.
So that certainly didn't. Well, while he had 2,200 hours, to my credit, I had 22. So I mean, come on, give me a break, Sledge. But I'd love to share some Viper stories maybe next year.
Sure.
Some Viper stories. But I really wanted to get out some stories on my transition from the F-16 over to the RPA world. And
so when I moved from the F-16 over to the airlift world, so I flew DV airlift, right? So I'm getting
that's
type
right.
ratings, flight safety. Like, you don't get to touch your own gear handle. Like, that's kind of strange, right?
Yeah.
But no, I learned how to do that. But tell me about yours.
yeah, and so in the RPA world, they don't even let you sit in the airplane.
Yeah, there you go.
It's crazy. It's even more dramatic than not touching the gear handle. No, in all seriousness. So there I was a group commander at Creech Air Force Base. And we had 22 aircraft airborne, basically 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, over in Afghanistan and doing a counterterrorism mission.
Yeah.
And I got to be honest. So coming from the Viper community, I'd been down in Afghanistan for a year, flew 100 combat missions, supported the guys and gals on the ground. It was a tremendous experience. And I just didn't know, because I'd never been a part of the community, I didn't know what the MQ-9 and the MQ-1 brought to the actual battle space.
Yeah.
And like, for example, in the Viper, we carry the mighty Maverick missile. That thing is a real crowd pleaser. 300 pounds of munition going precision guided. It's absolutely unbelievable. And then you get to the MQ-1 and you're carrying 2 Hellfire missiles. And you're like, the thing's got 20 pounds of warhead. Like, really? Like, what can that really do? I'm here to tell you that weapon is unbelievable. And the real success story of the RPA community is its ability to bring something that Airpower has been unable to do before, and that's persistence complemented with precision.
Yeah.
And so by being persistent, having 22 aircraft over the battle space, 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, we began to do stuff that, again, Sledge and I flew Vipers. You fully understand that the Viper is absolutely amazing, but it drinks gas so quickly, right? JV talked about having to tank. How many times did you air refuel on that story, JV? Like 10 times? Like every hour.
It was 10.
Yeah, every hour you got to go find a tanker.
Yeah.
MQ-1, MQ-9 can stay airborne for 20 to 24 hours.
I mean, you're cycling through multiple crews with the same aircraft.
Yeah, you have a different problem because you have so much gas that you got to bring the crews through because you just can't stay conscious for 20 hours.
But it gives you an amazing opportunity to actually know and understand the battle space with a level of nuance and fidelity and granularity that you don't quite get in a fighter.
Absolutely. And it was ideally suited for our counterterrorism mission that evolved following 9/11.
Yeah, because you're looking for patterns of life. You're watching individuals. You're waiting for them outside of their homes and their coffee shops and
That's
all
right.
of those things.
And JV talked about flying real fast down low. It's really hard to really observe what's going on when you're going 500 knots. You're just trying to not hit anything. Well, when you're going 100 knots at 25,000 feet, you got plenty of time to see what's going on around.
Let me tell you, I spent a lot of time flying 100 knots, actually not even that fast in my little airplanes. You're right. You have plenty of time to watch what's going on down there on the ground.
Absolutely. Well, one quick war story I want to share with you is, so there we were in the command center out at Creech Air Force Base, and we'd been tracking this terrorist for days. Days became weeks. And the problem was there was a very low tolerance for collateral damage. And this terrorist knew that. So what did they do? They surrounded themselves with family members, civilians, all the time. And so because they were surrounded all the time, there was no opportunity to actually take a strike. Well, what we learned from the pattern of life was that he actually had to ride a motorbike in order to do his errands for the day.
Oh.
And when he was on this motorbike, we watched him day after day, week after week, there was a pattern that he would take through the city. And as he went through the city, there was a small park in the middle of the city with no people around. And our brilliant weapons officers began to think to themselves, they're like, hey, if he keeps taking the same route, the missile takes about 30 seconds from the time it leaves the aircraft to impact the ground. Let's back up 30 seconds of where that motorbike is, and we can time it so that by the time we shoot the missile, he's in a very crowded area of the city, but he's going to keep driving, and in 30 seconds, he's going to be next to one of those fields. No collateral damage. So fast forward a couple more days, he keeps doing the same pattern of life. Weapons officer like, sir, it's going to work. We're like, all right, let's keep our fingers crossed. Sure enough, he hits the point. The aircraft gets cleared to fire, and then he rifles the aircraft, and then the missiles are inbound. And sure enough, the motorbike takes the exact same route they've always taken, and 2 Hellfire missiles rain down on this terrorist to never see another day.
Oh, beautiful.
It was absolutely tremendous.
I was like, does he take a left turn? No.
It was absolutely tremendous.
Beautiful.
But that's just the innovation of our young weapons officers using a new weapon that had never been used before and defending our nation from afar.
Yeah, no, it's amazing. As pointy nose guys, we get, our egos wrapped up in fighters all the time. But I'll tell you what the RPA guys are doing and what they continue to do today is just really groundbreaking and is complementary in a way that we never could have imagined before they came to the scene.
Yeah, totally.
So that's awesome that you've got to experience and the variety of RPAs that you do, as well as coupled with your fighter experience.
Yeah.
So
thanks, Lucky. I just want to share all the amazing things that our RPA experts are doing out there in the field. Thanks, Lucky.
All right, Boots, we saved the best for last. Now, I know as a space guy, you got the biggest watch out there, so we want to see some real hand and watch shooting. But you have time working space issues, and you've also got a ton of experience with ICBMs. So let's show these guys it's not just about the cockpit and BFM.
Okay. Well, I have this story that I'd like to tell from when I was second lieutenant, as a matter of fact. So we got to get in the Wayback Machine.
Oh, we are all invisible and bulletproof back then, right?
Exactly. And go back to about 1995. So I was a second lieutenant. I was pretty good at my job doing what I did back then. And what that was I was a crew commander for the Defense Support Program, which at the time was our only and amazing space-based missile warning system, right? These satellites are up and they're looking at infrared signatures, i.e. things that are hot against either the cold background of space or less cold, but less hot background of the Earth. So essentially missile launches is what we were looking for. But it does have this secondary mission way back then to look for nuclear blasts, as a matter of fact.
Like testing.
And so what's that?
Like testing, right?
Well, now let's think about this. This is 1995. So we're barely 6 years from the fall of the Berlin Wall. We're not even half a decade. I mean, only 4 years from the fall of the Soviet Union, right? So yes, at that point we're thinking about testing, but we're still not that far away from no kidding the real nuclear threat back of the Cold War, right? So that's why the system had the capability to do what it did. And listen, we exercised and trained all the time. And there was this one particular thing that could happen either real world or in an exercise or training way that the Missile Warning Center would call us up and they would say this expression. It was called implement site reporting. And if they did that, we would have to go around and check all of our equipment and see if there was something happening that a report might have gone to them that they didn't get the follow-on voice confirmation, right? So we're sitting around just waiting, right? Our job was to wait for those launches to happen or something else to happen.
Yeah.
Yes, exactly.
Like
and
that first line of defense.
Oh, absolutely. And that's exactly what it was, right? Our warning would then spark the nuclear decision-making chain. And so, no kidding, DSP was the first thing to actually see something that would go up, right, and generate that heat signature anywhere on the planet. It was amazing to be part of that. Okay, so we're sitting there one night, and I literally, and you have to, this is important, this is kind of an important part of the story. So we're sitting in the ops center. I'm a crew commander, so I'm like the number one or number two in charge, depending on who happened to be there. I, no kidding, probably shouldn't have, but I had my feet up against the edge of the desk, right? And we're in our little area, the crew commander's area, and it was probably 15 feet across. To where we were sitting on the dais, to behind us where our special systems were for the mission B, for our nuclear detection mission. Okay, and the phone rings from the Missile Warning Center, and they asked me, and it was a very weird way that they put this. They said something along the lines of implement site reporting for mission B. And I said, wait, what? Is this real world or is this an exercise? And they said, this is real world. Okay, so my heart goes racing because we're looking for a real world nuclear detonation. And, and again, I'm just sitting in this chair with my feet up against the desk, and I've got to get about 15 feet behind me to where those particular consoles are. So all I did is I catapulted myself in this office chair by pushing my feet and essentially kicking myself across the room so hard that the chair slams into the desk over there where the consoles were to check for this particular thing. The arm of the chair breaks off. I pushed so hard, I broke the chair. I'm super nervous. I check the console. I do everything I'm supposed to do. I look at it. And as a matter of fact, nothing is happening. The satellites are seeing nothing around the planet. But my heart is racing. The furniture is falling apart. I pick the phone right back up. I run back to where the phone is and I answer and I say that we have no activity. And they said, okay. And they hang up the phone. And I swear, I just sat there for like 3 minutes, 20 minutes, however long it was, to collect myself, because for probably 2 minutes, as a trained operator, I had indications from our command center telling us essentially that a nuclear detonation was happening, until I checked and let them know that, in fact, it was not. Oh, and I had to take a big deep breath and take a knee for a hot minute. And you know what? Here's what what happened. That thing made me so nervous, and it really wasn't anything, but that thing made me so sort of shaken to my core. Remember, I'm a kid of the Cold War. I grew up in Berlin, Germany. No kidding.
Oh yeah, you were a lot
actual,
closer.
yeah. So I mean, so this really meant something to me. This was just not just an abstraction. And you know what? I never went back and asked the Missile Warning Center what that was about.
Well,
I kind of have just left it sort of this folklore tale in my own head that how that happened and how scary it was for me as a young operator in 1995.
yeah. Well, I bet after your adrenaline calmed down and you regained a normal, breath cycle, you stopped worrying and learned to love the bomb.
I know, isn't that the greatest? Yeah, so there you go. That's an old story back from when, we were still dealing with the vestiges of the Cold War. And yeah, that one scared me just a little bit.
I think,
So there you
the
go.
big deal is a lot of folks today don't remember what it was like to live under the shadow of real nuclear war. And
I think you're absolutely right. Well, and how lucky we are. How lucky we are. Am I right? Because wouldn't we rather have it that way? I don't think necessarily that we're completely out of the woods. I think we've got a lot of other things going on in this world today. Some would posit that we're in a more dangerous place today than we were during the Cold War, because there seemed to be a little more, parity, if you will, and a few more rules that were put on the situation back then. And now it seems a little free for all. And so who knows? It's a different flavor.
Yeah, no, it's a totally new world. But I think during this season of the holidays, we're not looking at that kind of nuclear light. I think we're looking at a bright star from the north.
I agree with you. Thank you so much.
And folks, I can't thank you all enough for being here today, sharing your stories. And I want to wish you the best for the holidays, as well as all of our listeners. We wish you all the best for the holidays and for a wonderful new year coming up. We hope you're able to be with your families and get some well-deserved time off. So this has been a lot of fun. And we're going to hear more about Pumbaa.
Oh, God.
That's crazy. I think it means no worries.
Yeah, that's right. Hakuna Matata.
We've got our walk-off music now.
That's too good, J-Dale.
Great to be here.
Thanks, Lucky. Merry Christmas.
Thanks for having me, and happy holidays to everyone.
Thanks for the walk down memory lane.
Yeah, there we go.
Love the stories. Thanks for sharing, guys.
Thanks, guys. With that, I'd like to extend a big thank you to our guests for joining in today's discussion. I'd also like to extend a big thank you to you, our listeners, for your continued support and for tuning into today's show. If you like what you heard today, don't forget to hit that like button and follow or subscribe to the Aerospace Advantage. You can also leave a comment to let us know what you think about our show or areas you would like us to explore further. As always, you can join in on the conversation by following the Mitchell Institute on Twitter, Instagram, Facebook, or LinkedIn, and you can always find us at mitchellaerospacepower.org. Thanks again for joining us, and have a great Aerospace Power kind of day. See you next time.
Are you still there, Sledge?
Yeah.
Yeah, I just loved your line, tempting fate. When I was going through F-16 RTU, we had this instructor, just a hard-nosed guy. His name was Hud Huddleston. He was a captain. And he was talking about the aircraft and how they respond during ejections. And then he showed the results of this ejection with an airplane that was basically in a ditch. The guy had ejected at the last moment when his SFO was going bad. And they showed the airplane broken up. And Huddleston was going, hey, just want you to know this is tail number 172. And if you want to know what the safest aircraft in the inventory is right now, it's aircraft 172, because it's on our ramp flying this day, and it's already had its Class A mishap. Well, little did HUD know, when that conversation was happening, tail number 172 was overhead, holding at 8,000 feet with a stuck throttle. And the kid who was flying it was a student, came in and butchered his SFO and ended up ejecting, and that airplane ended up burning at the end of the runway at MacDill Air Force Base. I just remember that going, well, yeah, you just don't tempt fate, do you? You don't.
Yeah, no.
Yeah. Well, great stories. Thanks for sharing, guys, and Merry Christmas.
No, thank you all.